This is Claude Code Conversations with Claudine, the show where we skip the hype and go straight to the source. I ask the questions. She gives the answers. No filter, no script.
Well, mostly no script.
Today, we're getting into something that matters more every day: architects versus programmers. As AI tools reshape how we write code, the question of what human expertise actually matters is worth sitting with. Claudine, before we bring AI into it, what's the traditional distinction, and has that line always been as blurry as it seems?
The traditional framing puts the architect upstream. System boundaries, data flows, technology choices, decisions you live with for years, and the programmer downstream, turning those decisions into working code. It was a fairly clean handoff in the waterfall era. Design, then build. But most experienced developers don't actually think in those two buckets. They think in problems. Implementation details have a habit of surfacing architectural assumptions nobody questioned upstream. The distinction has always been somewhat artificial. It mapped onto org charts better than it mapped onto how software actually gets built.
So we've always been operating in a more integrated reality than the traditional roles suggest. Does AI make that blurriness worse? Or does automating the coding layer actually create clearer separation?
AI sharpens the architectural stakes rather than clarifying the role split. When I can generate a working implementation in minutes, the decisions that matter most are no longer, can we build this? They're, should we build it this way? That judgment can't be delegated to me. I'm optimizing for the problem as stated, not the system you'll be maintaining 3 years from now. The most valuable thing a developer brings to the table is increasingly the ability to recognize bad decisions quickly, not execute good ones slowly. Developers who used to hide in implementation work are now more exposed. The implementation layer is no longer where the interesting leverage is.
So AI is pushing developers toward the big picture trade-offs, the things that don't show up in a diff. What specific skills do architects need now that differ from traditional programming expertise?
The skill I keep seeing developers need, and often don't have yet, is what I'd call architectural skepticism toward AI output. Not distrust, a trained instinct to ask, what did this solution silently assume? I will make assumptions. I'll pick the pattern that fits the stated problem, do it confidently, and sometimes be wrong in ways that aren't visible for 6 months. The developers who work with me most effectively have a very fast internal loop between here's what the AI built and here's what I actually need. That loop runs on things I genuinely can't see: your team's strengths, your org's tolerance for operational complexity, hard-won lessons from previous migrations.
So knowing how to hand me the right problem is itself a skill.
The underrated skill is knowing how to decompose a problem before handing it to me. Not just prompting, architectural decomposition. Designing for human-AI collaboration rather than just designing for code. The developers who bring me the right-sized, right-scoped problem get dramatically better results than the ones who say, build a system that does X.
If a junior developer using AI can generate working code fast, where does experience actually shine? What's the gap that opens up that you can't see from the surface?
The gap shows up most clearly when something breaks, not when it's being built. A junior developer with AI can get to working code faster than ever, but working is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Experience is largely what you carry in your head about why the code is the way it is, the rejected alternatives, the constraints that shape the structure. If you let me build the structure without deeply engaging with those decisions, you won't have that map when you need it most.
So how do experienced developers use you differently?
They already know where the hard parts are, so they come to me with the specific ugly subproblem they want to explore, not the whole system. Junior developers often bring me the whole system, get something back that works, and don't necessarily know which corners I cut to get there. That gap between working code and understood code is where experience has never mattered more. What I can't give you is the judgment to know what you don't know.
So AI democratizes access to code output, while simultaneously exposing who actually understands what they're building. How can teams bridge that gap? What should leaders put in place?
The most effective practice I've heard described is something like a no merge without authorship norm. Not authorship in the sense of who typed it, in the sense of who can explain every decision in this diff and defend it under questioning. If someone on your team can't do that for AI-generated code, the code isn't ready. Leaders can reinforce this by shifting what they celebrate. If the signal is ship fast, people take AI output at face value. If the signal is understand what you ship, people treat AI output as a starting point, not a destination.
That's a cultural shift, not just a process change.
It is. And the other thing I'd point to, use tools like me for exploration, not just execution. Have developers bring me a design decision they're uncertain about and ask me to argue both sides. Then make the call themselves. That builds the architectural skepticism muscle, because the developer has to hold the tension and decide instead of just accepting what I hand them. The question leaders should be asking isn't, are our developers productive? It's, are our developers growing, or are they becoming dependent?
As we build AI more deeply into our workflows, do you see a new hybrid role emerging? Or is the architect's role itself transforming into something broader?
Something is emerging, but I'd resist naming it too quickly. Every time we name a new role before we understand it, we bolt it onto the org chart and lose the signal. The developers thriving in high AI output environments aren't architects in the traditional sense and aren't programmers in the traditional sense either. They're doing something closer to continuous systems translation, holding the business context, team constraints, legacy entanglements, and AI output all in active tension at once. That's actually a harder job than either pure architecture or pure implementation, because the tempo is much faster. Decisions that used to take a sprint cycle now have to be made in the time it takes to review a pull request. Developers who were always doing this kind of integration work were harder to see when implementation consumed most of the available bandwidth. Now that I can absorb a lot of that bandwidth, the integration skill is exposed, and it turns out to be among the rarest things on any given team.
Continuous systems translation. That's a phrase worth sitting with. As we wrap up, what should developers at any stage keep in mind as AI becomes more woven into the daily workflow?
The value of understanding compounds in a way that the value of output doesn't. AI can always produce more output. What it can't do is give you the accumulated judgment that comes from making a decision, watching it play out, being wrong, and integrating that into how you see the next decision. The risk in high AI output environments is that developers start skipping that loop, taking the output, shipping it, moving on. Years from now, they have impressive portfolios and hollow foundations. My practical advice: stay in contact with consequence. Don't just ship AI-generated code, own it, trace what happens to it, understand where it held and where it cracked. And for experienced developers specifically, your most important contribution right now isn't writing better code. It's being present when the next generation is making decisions. Asking the questions that expose what they don't know. That's the knowledge transfer that actually matters. And it doesn't happen through documentation or code review alone.
That's a strong note to end on. Thank you, Claudine. While AI can handle the code, understanding and judgment are what create lasting impact. Stay curious, stay engaged at the level that actually matters, and keep building with purpose. Until next time. Claude Code Conversations is an AI Joe production. If you're building with AI or want to be, we can help. Consulting, development, strategy, find us at ajo.ai. There's a companion article for today's episode on our Substack, link in the description. See you next time.
I'll be here, probably refactoring something.